Hello, what's going on, everyone? I'm John Hasselbauer, golf writer for thelines.com. You can find me at PGA Tout on Twitter. And in this video, we'll be talking about the 2023 British Open at Royal Liverpool. We'll touch a little bit on both the Barbasol, where we hit Vincent Norrman, as well as some takeaways from the Scottish Open last week. I'm recording this on Monday night. On Tuesday, tomorrow, we'll be releasing this, which is a preview video by and large for the British Open, but we'll also be releasing a video from the brain trust of golf minds at thelines.com. That is myself, Stephen Andrus, and Matt Brown. Will be going through in-depth, a very thorough breakdown of the course at Royal Liverpool, our favorite bets, how we think the course is going to play, not just outrights, but some props that we like. Always a good discussion. We try to do that at every major, that little round table discussion. So you're not just hearing from me the entire video. So I'm very excited to record that. It's always a fun video. And that will be coming out on Tuesday as well. So because we're spending so much time in that video going through bets and everything from a betting perspective, I want to make this video a little bit more focused on a preview of the course, so that you can make your own betting decisions, of course, but really set you up for anything, whether it be your bets, your DFS approach, or pools. Pools is a big thing that comes up, obviously, every major. I've already gotten my inbox flooding with pool invites, and that's where I've made a lot of my returns in the golf season, is just capitalizing on the low-hanging fruit, the popular guys, for pools. So I think this video should be pretty interchangeable for any way you want to get exposure to the Open. But let's just quickly, do a state of the union in golf of everything that happened last week. We had two golf tournaments. Obviously, the primary was the Scottish Open. I completely mismanaged my time on the Scottish Open. I stayed up late on Saturday night to finish my Open Championship preview. And by the time I had finished the preview, the golf had already begun. So I basically pulled an all-nighter and took like a 2-hour nap on Saturday. So what I should have done is gone to bed early, woken up early on Sunday morning to catch everything very coherently. But I was very groggy watching Rory McIlroy ultimately finish it off. I took a nap while Robert McIntyre went sort of this way, and our Tyrrell Hatton bet went this way. But in the end, I think the best links golf players kind of rose to the top. Kind of Rory McIlroy playing spoiler, an interesting juxtaposition from what happened with Fleetwood trying to win the Canadian Open against Nick Taylor. The Scottish Open was, almost a perfect fairy tale situation for Robert McIntyre, who's done everything in Scotland at his such young age, aside from winning the Scottish Open. So it seemed like that might have been a fairy tale ending, and then Rory played spoiler with a birdie finish. That's going to be, I think, good news from a betting perspective for everybody at the Open, because Rory was already the favorite, and his odds dipped from essentially co-favorite at like plus 750, 8-1, to now closer to like 6.5 to 1. So when the favorites odds get shorter, that usually means the rest of the board gets better odds. And I think when we get to that, we'll sort of talk through the collateral damage that happens when you have Rory and Scotty soaking up so much of the win equity. For the Barbasol, I don't want to talk really that much about it, but we did hit Vincent Norrman. That is the second. We're 2 for 3 on opposite field events, also hitting Matt Wallace at the Corrales. So I don't know what it is. I guess generally speaking, when you get to opposite field events, the depth of the field is much less, which concentrates even smaller the number of players who are actually capable of winning a tournament. Even Norman, who went on to win, did everything he could to give it away. So, feels like we have some house money going into this week. I didn't really know too much about Vincent Norrman before last week, beyond just that he hits the ball far and can make a bunch of putts. And that's exactly what he did in Kentucky last week. So we'll take it. And because the opposite field events are treating us well, I do have a full Barracuda betting card that will be in my final bets article on Wednesday. But okay, that was last week. Let's now spend, let's say, 10 minutes going through everything you need to know about the British Open at Royal Liverpool, aka Hoylake. I have on my screen now my preview article that is linked in the description of this video. And I spent a lot of time on this article, really diving in. Whenever we get a new course, I really take a lot of extra time background watching videos, watching flyovers, listening to players, listening to staff about how they want the course to play, kind of gleaning what we know from the past and how it will play. So I think just to start with, let's start with the field at a glance first. Really competitive field. It is 156 players. The cut is top 70 and ties. So we will see just under half of the field make it through to the weekend, which means a better chance for chasers, I think, is the main takeaway there. You have the top 50 OWGR automatically qualify. There are spots reserved for the top DP World Tour players. And there was also open qualifying where players like Brandon Grace and Charles Schwartzel from the Live Tour were able to get themselves in outside of World Golf ranking qualifications. It is one of the most densely contested fields. Everybody in the top 60 of the world is here with the exception of Will Zalatoris, who is injured. And unfortunately, Tiger Woods is not here this week. This would have actually been a really appealing week to bet on Tiger Woods, obviously the 2006 champ, and a very flat golf course, which is very walkable, and you know, a course that he could have really like strategized around. So it's a shame he's not healthy enough to play, but hopefully he's taking the time to recover. We could see him at the Open next year. Also have the list of alternates listed here. So Cam Davis is your first man up, followed by Hadwin, Matt Kuchar, Mito Pereira, and Keith Mitchell. I actually have a bet on Keith Mitchell at the Barracuda, and he is there this week. So I'm pretty sure he has committed to the fact that he's the fifth alternate, and it's Monday, and that's probably not going to change. So probably won't see Keith Mitchell this week. I'm wishing him the best in his preparation for the Barracuda Championship. Otherwise, let's see, past winners of the Open Championship. Obviously, Rory was the winner here in 2014. That was the last time that we came to these grounds. So a lot of talk about Rory whenever you won the most recent tour event and the event that was most recently played at this course. You are going to be a popular subject or topic of conversation. He did opt to skip his media responsibilities this week, so you may not hear about how he's preparing, but I think suffice to say he stacks up well to chase his first major win since 2014 when he last won here. In addition to Rory, some other like top contenders who have won at the Open include Cam Smith, who won last year on a extremely generous off the tee course, which is in many ways the polar opposite of what we will see this week. I don't love Cam Smith's fit here, and anybody who has an unreliable driver, I think is going to get exposed at Hoylake. We'll touch on that a little bit further as we go on. But Colin Morikawa is also here. If conditions are down, he's somebody who can basically pull off the same game plan he brought to Royal St. George's in 2021. So somebody to keep an eye out depending on the weather. Shane Lowry is amongst the favorites. Jordan Spieth amongst the favorites. Louis Oosthuizen is an interesting name because if we were playing this course 2 years ago, I would definitely have a bet on him and say that he is the ideal fit for a course like this that's just hit fairways and hit long irons accurately and lag putt well. Those are all things that Louis Oosthuizen has always done throughout his career. Unfortunately, since he has joined Live, he's completely fallen off a cliff, and he's not contending on Live. So he will probably be a fade for me this week, but somebody who in general has lined up well on links courses. Okay, so now let's go from the field to an introduction to Liverpool Golf Club itself, Royal Liverpool, I should say. You can make plenty of Beatles references. Liverpool, obviously, close to where the Beatles made their hay, which is probably very topical 3 Open Championships ago. We've only been here twice since 1967. Tiger won in 2006. Rory won in 2014. So a little odd that it's been basically 3 tournaments in 50 years. But I would say cliff notes on Royal Liverpool. It's not a visually stunning or it's not a challenging course to the eye. It actually is a pretty nice visual because it has the shoreline and the water in the background, but there's nothing architecturally about this course that makes it look dramatic or in your face flashy at all. It's a very flat piece of land. Used to be a horse racing track, so it's not this wild topography of a rolling landscape. It's really flat fairways. Some nuance to the greens, but in general, compared to many other links courses, a pretty flat green. Not a course like in Augusta or Kapalua, for example, where you're going to see uneven fairway lies. I think you'll get some pretty true bounces. If you hit the fairway, it's going to land and bounce the way it's supposed to. The course gets its defense from the elements. So there is nothing stopping the wind here. At the Scottish Open last week, if you watch closely, you probably noticed there's a lot more trees than you may be used to seeing on a links course, and that's going to take the element of wind out of it a little bit. If you can hit a low-flighted ball, you can keep it below the tree line and have your ball not affected so much by the wind. So that is not the case here. You can't hide from the wind. If it's blowing at all, you're going to feel it. On most weeks on the PGA Tour, as an example, if you see 5 to 10 miles an hour of wind, you would just chalk that off as negligible and say the wind's not really going to affect this course, whether it be the trees that block it or the grandstands that get put up. It's really not something that's going to drastically affect the tournament. Here, you're going to feel 5 to 10 miles an hour of wind a lot more than you typically would on a given PGA Tour event, just because it's completely unimpeded. So there's going to be a lot of math that you need to do. I think you need to really lean on an experienced caddy who's played links golf, who knows the area, to do that math and understand, depending on which direction the wind is coming from, not only what club do you want to hit, say, on your tee shot, but what club you want to hit on your next 2 shots. If you have this prevailing wind and the pin is in a position where you can't hit it if you're on the right side of the fairway with the way that the wind's blowing, these are all calculations that you need to do your homework on. And I think that's why we see a little bit of stickiness with links golf in general. A lot of guys who know how to manage their distances and control their ball and hit a flighted tee shot are going to have success here. And I think that will be repeatable, maybe not necessarily from St. Andrews, because that was definitely an extreme anomaly of links golf where it kind of took precision off the tee out of play, the widest fairways we see in all of golf. But take pretty much any example of any year prior to St. Andrews, and you'll see a similar emphasis on demanding tee shots, needing precision off the tee, hitting flighted. I'm really looking forward to a straight ball flight, preferably a draw to even, pierce through the wind further. I think generally these fades tend to get swept through by the wind. So anybody who relies on a stock fade or hits a big swooping fade, I think that could be a big problem here. The other thing that I just notice about this course in general is like creativity and shot making is usually something that's a big buzzword in links golf. It's why Jordan Spieth has such a renowned history on links golf, how he won at Royal Birkdale in 2017. Just using that sort of like escapability from hazards, pulling off really unique shots, hitting blind shots over sand dunes and stuff like that. None of that is really applicable here. That you're going to get a true lie in the fairway. You're going to probably be able to Texas wedge putt from any greenside surrounding areas. Obviously, there are like gorse and fescue and pot bunkers that if you hit those hazards, you're going to have to punch out. There's also internal out of bounds, which is going to be a big topic of conversation this week. But these are all hazards where you know that they're there, and if you just aim away from them and you can pull off I can't miss right on this hole, so let's hit a shot that we definitely won't miss right. Guys who can execute that sort of game plan are going to do the best here, I think, and that goes for tee shots and also approaches. There's going to be different pin locations on these large greens where if they tuck it on the right side and the wind is blowing to the right, you don't want to go anywhere near that pin. So you're going to play a little bit more conservatively. Again, strategy, experience, a good caddy. These are all very important things this week. I think this might be one of the most important weeks of the year to have an experienced and knowledgeable caddy. Just because you're doing so much math with wind calculations, air density, landing zones within the greens. There's different undulations and different levels of the greens that you need to be cognizant of. There's runoffs that are just absolute no's that you can't go near. There's pot bunkers that are stroke penalties near the greens as well. So just understanding where not to miss, playing conservatively. I don't think you have to be crazy aggressive on this golf course. I think if I had to guess, I would say 12 under par is a realistic total to win this week. And just in general, I think there's a lot more bite to this course than it may look on paper. So then just going into a breakdown of the course, I think that's a good segue. So it is 7,383 yards as a par 71. In 2014, the last time we were here, this was a par 72. They converted the 10th hole from a very easy and scoreable par 5, reachable in 2, to a very difficult and long par 4. And something that is always interesting when you convert a 5 to a 4 is that the greens are intended to be trickier, to be the challenge of that hole. So now you're talking about a very long par 4 that players are going to be hitting 250-yard shots into, because there's sort of a forced, you can't hit it farther than 350 yards on your tee shot. There's a forced layup before that. So you are basically being forced to hit probably a 200-yard approach for everybody in the field into a small green that's protected by bunkers with out of bounds on the left. So 10th hole went from one of the easiest places to get a birdie to an actual, like, you're leaving with par and feeling pretty good about yourself. So I think the 4th and the 5th hole are easy birdie holes, or the easiest opportunities to score. One is a borderline drivable par 4, and one is a very reachable and short par 5. Other than that, I think the players are really going to have to work to score on this course. There's 7 par 4s over 450 yards. There's 2 par 5s over 600 yards that, unless there's a helping wind, are not going to be reachable in 2, and you're just going to have to hit 2 really good shots in order to get a birdie on those. And then everything in between, you're talking about like par 3s that are no gimme par 3s, and some 400 to 450 yard par 4s. You're going to have to hit 2 good shots, and it depends on where the pin is, but I wouldn't really call any of those, besides the 2 I mentioned on the front 9, to be gimme birdies. So if you're shooting 3 under each day, I think you can win on a par 71 course like this. Obviously, with the internal out of bounds in play on a lot of these holes, there's going to be a lot of potential blowups. Double bogey avoidance are key stats that I'm looking for this week to understand the players who are the best at mitigating their misses. So the last piece I want to touch on, since we'll go into my bets and everything in the Megapod video that I do with Matt and Steven. But the last thing I want to touch on in this preview video is just the key stats that I landed on. So I started with bogey avoidance and double bogey avoidance. That's going to tell you who understands where the hazards are and doesn't hit it to them. I think that's a really important stat this week. That's, it might go without saying, but that's a stat that I'm actually kind of putting the most emphasis on, because I think conservative play is going to take you pretty far, especially for value players who may not be able to win, but can perform their expectation. Bogey avoidance, double bogey avoidance is something that I am leaning pretty heavily on. Strokes gained off the tee. If I could pick one characteristic to perform well on this course, I think being an elite total driver, above average in accuracy and driving distance is the most crucial stat. That's going to allow you to kind of cut off certain angles on this course. It's going to allow you to confidently take on a lot of like dangerous internal out of bounds that come into play on 6 of these holes. And it's going to give you shorter irons in windy conditions, which I think is crucial. If you're hitting a 200-yard shot consistently into high winds and firm greens, which is going to be the case if you're laying up off the tee, it's going to be really hard to score that way. But if you're taking the risk on your tee shots and you're avoiding the hazards, and all of a sudden you have 150 in on a bunch of these approach shots, now we're talking about generating birdie opportunities where other players in the field cannot. So I think strokes gained off the tee is going to be crucial. If we look back on this at the end of the week, I expect to see the best off the tee players to rise to the top. I'm putting a small layer of off the tee on shorter courses just in case the course firms up and there are some opportunities to hit these layup shots. I want a little piece of that, but in general, I think total driving is the most important. Approach always important, and proximity from 200 plus will come into play a lot with so many 450 plus holes. Most of the par 3s are over 200 yards, and all of the par 5s will require accurate long irons. So I think that's very crucial this week. We talked about par 4 and par 5 scoring. Scrambling around the green, always important in links golf. Putting is something I think I'll put more emphasis on this week than most. Total over the last 36 rounds, slow greens, always a defining characteristic of links golf. And then 3-putt avoidance is always something I look for on large greens, which we definitely have in store this week. And then just to round it out, strokes gained total in high winds, super, super important this week. I'm looking at the PGA Championship at Kiowa Island. I think that's an important comp course for this week. I think you could look at the Mexico Open, although not a lot of great players played there, but that was a high wind coastal event. So just anywhere where wind is affecting not only tee shots, but putting, that's something that I want to reference for this week. And then major championship history over the last 5 years. Players who can anecdotally handle the pressure of some just high intensity tee shots down the stretch of this course. I think that's huge. This week, this does not strike me as the type of course that we're going to see a random first-time major winner. So my bold take of the week, if it's bold enough, would be that whoever wins this week will not win their first ever major like a Wyndham Clark might have pulled off at the U.S. Open. And then course and comp course history is my last one. That's just to factor in any links golf performance, but also performance on courses on the PGA Tour that kind of play linksy. The Players Championship at TPC Sawgrass is the best example I can find of a wind-affected course with many hazards close to the fairways that require a mix of layups and drivers off the tee. We've seen a player like a Bryson DeChambeau, for example, find success as a long hitter who knows when to hit driver and when to lay back. But we've also seen plotters like a Webb Simpson go on to have success and win there. So that's the type of course that I think we'll see some overlapping leaderboards from, and one I'm definitely taking into close consideration when I put my player pool together. Okay, so I think we'll cut it off right there. This is typically when I would get into my betting card. To be completely honest, it's Monday night and I've only gotten halfway through it because there are so many more details that I want to dig into related to the weather. So I'm keeping a close eye on how firm the course is playing. Is it getting sunlight? Is it drying up? Is it getting rain? Because the more wetness and more rain that we get in the forecast, the more I'm going to lean towards the better drivers. The firmer it gets, the more I think it opens it up to shorter hitters who can roll out sort of a layup off the tee, a driving iron. If it's soft, I don't think we'll see as many driving irons. So that's one. And then the wind, obviously, if we get a ton of wind, I think that opens it up to a little bit more randomness, but obviously puts more of a emphasis on around the green than approach play. So for now, wind is going to be tough to project. I don't think it's possible for it to be completely calm with where we are geographically, but it could be really nasty. And if it is, then I think that sets us up for a little carnage and a little bit more randomness. So those are the two things I'm looking out for. So make sure you check out the Megapod video. with myself, Matt, and Steven, which will be out on Tuesday. So you can get all of our analysis and my outright bets for the British Open. Until then, best of luck with all of your British Open bets.